Good morning, everyone, and welcome to NorthStar Community. So glad to see you again today. Um, Today, we're going to talk about paradigms. Now, when I was early in my career, Joel Barker came out with this whole series called the what was it called? Paradigms, the wisdom of something like that, and it became kind of one of those kind of um, popular things to do for a while. But it was very good. It was really good. What he's trying to get us to see was how paradigms really affect how we do things. So paradigms are like the set of values and beliefs that we live by. And the good or bad of it is we don't think about it a lot, it's just what we do. And, so the problem is you can get paradigm paralysis where you need the change and you don't. And of course, there's just story after story in the business world about companies, big companies who were destroyed because they just couldn't shift from their successful paradigm to the new paradigms that are hitting them. And of course, particularly in like technology. So some examples he uses like Kodak, they didn't believe that digital photography would ever happen. And of course, it wiped them out. Motorola had the flip phone, analog phone, and they felt like it was good enough, and that this digital telephone wasn't worth it. And of course, they got wiped out. Maybe the biggest one is the Swiss watchmakers back in the 70s. They had I think it was 96% of the market share of watches. If you wore a watch, it was made in Switzerland. And then Seiko came along from Japan with the battery watch, and they said, "Oh, nobody's going to want that. It doesn't have any moving parts. Who would want that?" And of course, we know what happened there. So I think they went from 96% market share to like 5% market share in about a period of like 3 years. So as you can see, the paradigm shifts can be very upheaval and very disruptive. Well, think about us in recovery. What are our paradigms in recovery? Some of the paradigms we have is, of course, you have to stop. You have to believe in a higher power, things like that. But I tell you what, I think the biggest paradigm that we live by and what creates so much of our issues is that we just don't see ourselves as valuable and worthy because of the trauma in our life, the abandonment in our lives, whatever. We come to decide that the way we are, the way we were created, who we fundamentally are, is flawed, broken, and end of the day, we're not worthy. That's what drives addiction, in my view. So one of my paradigms is I read every once in a while about they're working on an addiction pill that's going to stop addiction. I really hope that happens, but my paradigm is addiction is the end result of all the stuff that happens in our lives, the pain, the trauma, the abandonment, the abuse, the mind numbing stuff that happens to many of us, but even the smaller stuff, it's stuff that just keeps adding up and adding up to us creating this illusion that we are not a loving, perfect person. And when I say perfect, I don't mean that we're perfect in what we do, but God created us, so it's a little hard to argue with who we are. I love Gerald May in his book Addiction and Grace. He talks about the biggest myth in our lives is that we are broken, unlovable, unimportant people. The fact is, God created us, created you. And so, last I checked, God knows what He's doing. So, that's what I see as the paradigm to addiction is that. So, I'm going to read you parts of Romans 9 toward the end, and this is the Message version. But hear what Paul's writing about here about each of us. He says, "Who in this world do you think you are to second guess God? Do you, for one moment, suppose any of us knows enough to call God into question?" So Paul's really hammering on us on this. How dare we? How dare we say we're not worthy and lovable? How dare we say that we're broken as we are? God's the one who determines who we are. We all have our own special knowledge, right? Our needs, our skills. That's what self-actualization is all about. Is I have my skills, I have my dreams, I have the things that I love, and you have yours, and that's what makes us special. And self-actualization is really getting to find that. But this is what he says, and Hosea writes this in the Old Testament: "I'll call nobodies and make them somebodies. I'll call the unloved and make them beloved. In the place where they yelled out, "You're nobody," they're calling you God's living children. Isaiah maintained the same emphasis in Isaiah. In each grain of sand on the seashore were numbered. If each grain of sand on the seashore were numbered, and the sum label chosen of God, they'd be numbers still, not names. Salvation comes by personal selection. God doesn't count us; He calls us by name. Arithmetic is not the focus. Do you hear that? He knows us by name. And for us in our shame base, don't let that scare you. Don't go, "Oh no, He knows what I'm doing, all the crazy things I'm doing in my addiction." Please don't hear it that way. God is love. He loves you. So make sure you hear that. What I'm trying to say is you're important and special to God. That's what you need to hear there. If our powerful God had not provided us a legacy of living children, we would have ended up like ghost towns, like Sodom and Gomorrah. So then Paul's talking about, next he's writing about the people who, aren't addicted. How can we sum this up? All those people who didn't seem interested in what God was doing actually embraced what God was doing as He straightened out their lives. Isn't that us? I'm assuming, again, if you're watching this, you are in recovery. You believe in God enough to be on here, because that's what I'm going to talk about, is God's love. And so think about it. God loves us, and He helps us to straighten out our broken lives. And He says, in Israel, who seemed so interested in reading and talking about God was doing, missed it. How could they miss it? Because instead of trusting God, they took over. They were absorbed in what they themselves were doing. They were so absorbed in their God projects that they didn't notice God right in front of them. Isn't that great, though, for an analogy for us in addiction recovery? Both ways. We know people are very judgmental, who aren't able to look at themselves and see what's going on in their lives. But think about us. When we try to take over, we think we can fix all of our things, and we don't want to be worrying about what God's thinking. We don't want to do all that stuff. We want to live our lives the way we want to. And we take over our lives, and we know how that goes for us. End up causing us lots of problems. And I love this. This is one of my favorite verses in the Bible. So Paul goes on to say, they are absorbed in what they themselves are doing, so they couldn't hear God. They were so absorbed in their God projects, they didn't notice what God for right, blah, 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 like a huge rock in the middle of the road. And so they stumbled into Him and went sprawling. Isaiah again gives us the metaphor for pulling this together. So this is God talking. Careful. I've put a huge stone on the road to Mount Zion, a stone you can't get around. But the stone is me. If you're looking for me, you'll find me on the way, not in the way. Isn't that beautiful? I know for you guys who are here listening to me, you're at some level of recovery. You and I both know that big rock in the road is what got you to here. Whatever that was, an arrest, financial issues, broken relationships, the feeling of emptiness, whatever it was pain that got you here. It wasn't because you suddenly started loving yourself and thinking you were great. It was because of pain. As Russell Brand so well states, addiction starts with pain and addiction ends with pain. And you know that. That's why you're here. So the definition of a paradigm is a fundamental change in our thinking is in effect a paradigm shift. So a paradigm is thoughts and beliefs we have that we view as rules and regulations. It defines the boundaries and creates limits for us. So we can't do this, can't do that, or we can do this. Prescribes success within those boundaries, and it helps to keep us successful. So again, in our paradigms, our original paradigm that I'm arguing is that we see our paradigms that we are worthless, we are not valuable, we don't like ourselves as we are. We think if we were better people, we wouldn't have all these issues. We wouldn't be weak if we were stronger. Those are the paradigms. And it's so hard for us to accept the real paradigm is that you were wondrously and wonderfully made by God. And if that's the case, then you're good. It's just that all the trauma, the abandonment, the brokenness, the harm in your life is what created so much of the addiction behaviors in our lives. We seek but do not see. We listen but we do not hear. Isn't that true about us when we're in our addiction? How we just, the things that we see as factual and real and obviously true, when we, looking back now, some of our recovery, go, oh my goodness, what was I thinking? Excuse me. But that's the point here. Our paradigm isn't about us being loathsome, unvaluable, worthless people at some level. It's the pain we feel from all the trauma and abandonment. And think about it, for many of us, the reason that the immobilization part is what makes trauma and abandonment so difficult, is because we kind of we judge ourselves with shame. We don't see ourselves as good, decent people. We see ourselves as shame-based people. We don't believe in ourselves. We don't value ourselves. Or we think we have to overachieve to be loved. All these things, none of it's real. What's real is that you can have a rich, full, meaningful life, full of joy, satisfaction, and yes, setbacks and trauma and tough times as well. But you can handle it better because of your ability to see yourself with a rich, full, meaningful life. When we talk about rich, full, meaningful life at NorthStar, sometimes people are just like, what are you talking about? But I will tell you, there are people in there now who are starting to see it. And they're starting to say, you know what? I can have a rich, full, meaningful life. I don't know about you. That's a paradigm shift, and a big one. And the problem, so the thing is, we have to understand about paradigms is they create problems that we think we cannot solve, but yet that's what we have to do, is shift our paradigms. And our big paradigm shift is the law of human gravity. Some of you know as rock bottom, of course, but the law of human gravity is an immutable law. It says human behavior, we always gravitate towards the path of least resistance. So us in recovery, we start to understand this when we say, so what that means is it's easier for me to live addictively, either with substances, compulsive behaviors, unhealthy relationships, or probably all three of those basically, than it is to face our pain, to acknowledge the trauma, to acknowledge the shame in our lives. Because let's be honest, guys, facing our shame and looking at that is not pleasant. I get it. I mean, I don't like looking at the things I feel shame about. So what do? So our paradigm shift is we live in shame, we live in guilt, we live in misery, we go out and live addictively, we create more issues, we hurt ourselves, we hurt others around us, all those things we do to loved ones, because of all the stuff that happened to us in our past. So the paradigm shift is, I cannot turn the clock back. There's nothing I can do to reverse what has happened to me. But what I can do is I can create a new life, a rich, full, meaningful life. I don't shut the door on all the stuff that happened to me before, because that would take away who you are. But you certainly don't have to carry it with you and keep you from moving forward. And the thing is, when you recover, you're even a better person. I love one time I saw that great quote about addiction is the only disease that we know of where once you get the disease and you recover, you can actually be a healthier, better person because of the disease. And that is so true. For us that are further down the road in recovery, you know what I'm talking about. It's not so hard now. You don't have all those cravings you used to have. You still have to be on guard. You still need to do your treatments of groups and things like that to stay away from relapse. And for us that are more in the beginning part, it's hard sometimes not to just relapse and go back. But if you do, it's okay. That's part of recovery. But the fact is, you can't turn the clock back. Like my professor in graduate school, Dr. Joel Hefler used to say, I don't care about your childhood. I just care about how your childhood affects you today. That's what you got to focus on. It doesn't make sense for us to carry trauma from 30 years ago and us living our lives based on that trauma today. And that's all I'm saying. So our paradigm shift is, it is easier, if we go from it's easier to live addictively and not face our pain, to we shift our paradigm to say, you know what, it's not easy, but I now see that it's harder to live addictively than it is to live non-addictively. That's a paradigm shift. And I hope that you guys can see that. And what causes paradigm shifts? It's that sense of knowing that something different needs to happen. For many of us, it's the taste of ash in our mouths. It's the gnawing feelings of failure and the loathing that we feel about ourselves because we did it again. We relapsed again. We used again. We over-functioned again. Whatever it is. And we're just getting sick and tired of it. So here's some good paradigm statements that we probably have all said at some point in our recovery. One is, only old people go to AA. I'm not going to go. That's for old people. Or how about, is your paradigm addiction is a disease? Or is your paradigm addiction is about willpower, getting stronger so I can get over this? You have to forget about your childhood and move on. That's a paradigm. Doesn't work, but it's one. It is a paradigm. Or see myself, we've talked about some, or I see myself as unlovable. That is such a huge paradigm. I hope you're seeing this one. Yes, there's things you need to work on. No, you're not perfect. But you know what? You are wonderfully and beautifully made. That's the paradigm shift. You don't have to carry the burden of guilt and shame with you when you get to that point. So think about moving and shifting your paradigm. Think about it. Think about what that means for you. You are wonderfully and wholly created by God. Excuse me, I have a cold. You have special gifts, skills, talents. You are someone that people would like to connect with. You may have to work on that a little bit. Some of us don't know what that means. It's your time to recover. These are how I see paradigm shifts, thinking anew. It's your time now to understand PTSD and what it did to you, the harm it's done to you, but also the beauty that comes from it once you get through it. I'm telling you, the best people in the world are people who have recovered from stuff. I'm telling you, because you understand. You know the pain. You understand what hell is. You remember those nights of maybe not trying to kill yourself, but man, if you could go, you wouldn't mind. Just these days upon days of mind-numbing, dysfunctional behavior, days and days of mind-numbing destruction, and now you're here. You're tired of it. Your paradigm has shifted from, I want to avoid at all costs thinking about the pain and the hurt in my life, to I want to recover and get past my pain, put my pain in perspective, and be a good and decent person. What a paradigm shift. But you can do it. That's why you're sitting here, because you wouldn't be if you didn't think so. So it's your time to understand PTSD, what's done to you. It's your time to understand what abandonment has done to you. It's your time to understand what your childhood, how it affects you today, and put it in perspective and move forward. It's your time to realize that you cannot turn the clock back. And then, of course, it's your time to start to believe that you are wonderfully made. You are not a broken and flawed person that no one would like. So I thank you for listening today. I want you to think about some of these paradigm statements you have. You know, they're out there. So anyway, we meet on Wednesdays and Fridays at 6:30 here at Walnut Grove Baptist Church in McCaysville, Virginia. Please forgive me for my cough. Sorry. We also meet on Sunday mornings at 9 a.m. for a small group, and then we have our 11:15 online service at 11:15. So you're welcome to come to all those. Don't worry about how you dress. We do feed you on Wednesday and Fridays. We have childcare also on Wednesdays and Fridays. So we're trying to take away every reason you have not to come and get healthy. We're a great group. We're safe. We're healthy. We don't tell you what to do. We don't judge you. We just listen to you and support you for what you're going through, because we know we're there too. So we always close on each of our services with the prayer of serenity. So let me close today with that. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. Living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardships as a pathway to peace. Taking, as Jesus did, the sinful world as it is, not as I would have it. Trusting that Jesus will make all things right if I surrender to his will, that I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with him forever in the next. Amen. Again, I thank you for joining us and look forward to hearing from you again soon.